Hello and welcome. My name is Ian Helms, and I'll be your host for today's event, Changing Landscape of Immigration Management, presented by Envoy. Envoy is the leading immigration services provider. We combine expert legal representation with technology to provide the only enterprise platform that enables companies to effortlessly hire and manage their employees across borders. That's everything from navigating U.S. immigration to securing global work authorization and business visas, to ensuring compliance by tracking and managing all of your international employees. We do that for more than 1,000 companies across many industries, locations, and company sizes. First, a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we'll be sure to send you the recorded session for your reference or to share with others after the presentation. The presentation will last for about 45 minutes with some time left at the end for question and answer. So please feel free to use the question function on the right-hand side of your webinar screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. And now let's introduce our presenter, Jamie Gilpin. Jamie is Envoy's CMO and Workforce Trends Analyst with more than a decade of experience in workforce solutions and HR technology. Excited to have you here, Jamie.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. I love all of our webinars, but this is one that I get really excited about. We like to typically do like a recap at the end of each year as far as what happened in immigration, how it's changing, and what a year it has been. So just to give a little bit of background, I lead all of the research efforts for Envoy, including third-party surveys, and we'll talk a little bit about the one that we did earlier this year, and one actually just got out of field called Immigration Trends that we do with Nielsen Harris Poll, and also any sort of external and consulting engagements, employer and customer interviews. I speak at a ton of events, and because of that, I really have a ton of experience, especially in the HR tech and recruitment space, not only here at Envoy, but about 14 years of my career with CareerBuilder. And really that's where I saw firsthand the challenges that employers had in recruiting and retaining great talent, especially in those STEM and tech areas. And so when this opportunity came to me to work with Envoy and create solutions for employees to leverage really this international talent pool and hire and manage employees across borders, I was really excited. And it truly has been an incredible journey over the last few years, really focusing on bringing simplicity and efficiency and transparency to immigration management. But it has been a journey, and especially these past 12 months, has been very interesting, not only for our customers, but a lot of the companies that we talk to. And so, and that's really what this webinar is about. So over this next half hour, we're going to take maybe 45 minutes, but it should be right around 30 minutes. We're going to take the time to really talk about the changing landscape of immigration management, trends that we saw emerge at the beginning of the year, and how those have sort of come into fruition through the end of the year, and what we think about 2018 and how employers are managing this function within their organizations. We will focus mainly on immigration into the United States. I'll cover a little bit on the global side. We have an entire global function and on global immigration here in the office, but that can be honestly like 3 or 4 webinars all in of itself because of all the changes in Australia and Brexit and UK and everything else. So we'll focus mainly on the US side, and we'll jump right in. So here's our agenda. Again, immigration trends. We'll talk about some employer challenges, what we're seeing in terms of immigration, again, mainly in the US, legislated versus enforcement, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about compliance, because that has been probably the largest trend that and the largest question that most of the companies and employers that we talk to come to us with. And then and again, like I said, immigration landscape 2018. So I could talk about this for hours. I'm not going to. I'm going to try to high level it. As workforce trends analyst, I've been actually researching and studying this for the better part of a decade, both here at CareerBuilder. But the skills gap is real. It's not just here in the U.S., it's around the world. Half of employers say that they report difficulty filling jobs. We're going to have 2.4 million STEM jobs unfilled by 2018. I think even more jarring, 1.4 million computer software jobs open by 2020, and that's according to the Department of Labor. 40 million shortage of high skilled. So it is real, but it's not just the skills gap that is what's keeping employers up at night, if you use that tired old adage. But the other side of it is our employee expectations are changing. 71% of millennials want and expect an international assignment, and that's just on the millennial side. That doesn't take into account the vast amount of organizations, especially multinational, large organizations that we work with, that international assignment is really part of their succession management and part of their development planning. So not too surprising that international assignments increased by 25% in the last 10 years and is expected to double by 2020. So not to belabor this point much further, but this is really at the C-suite. C-level CEOs are concerned with a wide range of risks in their business, but literally number 3 of their concerns is availability of key skills. And when PwC did this study, they asked a further question, which is, okay, if this is your third most difficult, challenge that you have facing your organization, what are you doing to find them? So promoting talent diversity, inclusiveness, obviously very important. We've changed our people strategy to reflect the skills and employment structures we need for the future. That sounds really complicated. So I know HR is really up to the challenge, but it is a challenge. And then finally, we move talent to where we need it, or we seek out the best talent regardless of demographics or geography. So right there, arguably the first one as well, but those top 2, or maybe even 3 out of the top 4 ways that CEOs say, hey, here's how we can find the skills that we need, involve global mobility, right? And a part of that, immigration. And so how do we get to the talent? How do we get our talent where we need it? So how do we move our talent across our various locations multinationally? And then how do we get the best talent here regardless of where they're from internationally and globally? And so that leads us right into immigration and the trends that we see really in our in companies and how they're managing this function, how it's changing, especially over these last 12 months. And so we're going to start with just a really quick recap of immigration trends 2017, the key trends that we saw from that report. And then again, like I said, we're actually in field right now, or actually just came out of field. Super exciting. I'm excited to get the data over the next couple of weeks from Nielsen. But we survey about just over 400 employers, both HR and hiring managers. It really is dispersed across various industries, STEM being a big part of that. 23% of the companies surveyed employ 20,000 employees or more. And again, they've got quite a few of them, about 1 in 4 have 1 to 5 global locations. Quite a few are private companies, but other are public companies. So what do they tell us? Key takeaways, not too surprising as we think about the sort of macro environment that's happening from a skills perspective and the importance that an international talent pool plays. But 55% of employers expected their foreign national headcount to increase this year. What I find fascinating about that stat, because we've done this now, this will be our 3rd year, this upcoming report, but over the last 2 years, so in 2016, 34% of employers expected their foreign national headcount to increase. That jumped to 55% in just 12 months, which is pretty incredible. Something else that we asked is around work authorization globally, so outside of the U.S., and 59%, so 60% of employers basically said that they expect their their demand for work authorization outside the U.S. to increase. So again, that speaks to that global mobility and honestly the expectations of talent to move around the world and take on international assignments. And so because of the skills gap, 63% of employers say sourcing foreign national employees are extremely or very important to their company's talent acquisition strategy. Again, a huge jump year over year from 2016. And then finally, employers are investing, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, because I think one of the not surprising trends that happened this year was changes to some of those investments in foreign national talent. So yes, they're investing in recruiting and retaining this talent pool, 83%, and they do that with immigration-related perks. So think everything from housing to transportation, and the study goes into a lot of that detail that we can share post the webinar along with this presentation. But 92% spend an average of $6,000 or more on immigration-related perks. You see the breakdown there, but 38% spend at least $16,000 on immigration-related perks for their expat or their foreign national employees. Another way that they invest in this really important talent pool is their green card policy. So 71% of employers sponsor green cards. In this study in 2017, that's up from 63% actually from 2016, so up a little bit. And you can see the breakdown there. Majority, a good portion of them actually sponsor immediately, and you see the difference between 2016 and 2017 there, between STEM and all. After 1 year of service, you see the breakdown there. 3 years, so that's pretty typical after their first H-1B visa renewal, and then after 5 years. And then there's also, so that's all tenure-based. About 30% of employers say that they really focus their immigration policy on tenure. Another 33% say that they do it by performance, and they do it by kind of sort of the leader's discretion. But if you are doing it by tenure, that gives you a good breakdown and benchmark. Another question that we get constantly is, do employers pay for the green card fees? The answer is yes. So 84% pay for all green card fees, with about half of those employers requiring a payback stipulation if the employee leaves. One thing so this was from the study, but just anecdotally from the data from our customer base, again, about 1,000 companies, there was a huge change in immigration policies this year. For companies that didn't have a green card or immigration policy, they instituted one. For those that did, they actually reduced the time or tenure that the employee needed. And a lot of the feedback that we heard was either, one, we want to keep our employees safe. We know that green card is a far more stable work authorization than perhaps the H-1B, or at least that is the perception in a lot of employers' minds. And so how do we get our employees not only safe so that we know that they will be here because we need them on these projects, but two, how do we give them peace of mind to show that obviously that they are important, and that their peace of mind and productivity and value is extremely important to the organization. So that was one change that we saw on the immigration policy side. Some other key takeaways, and again, I'll sort of balance the stats with what we see in our customer base and in our conversations that we have with companies, at events and otherwise. But HR is the primary department responsible for managing immigration. I think most of us on the call realize that. But what organizations are trying to figure out right now from just an org structure standpoint is, does it belong in acquisition, right? Does it belong in TA? Does it belong in just the overarching HR, human resources? Do we break out a global mobility department? You can see there 70% of employers have a global mobility department. Again, the study goes into details of, if you have this many employees, there's typically 10 people in this department. If you have over 10,000, I think there's typically even 20 or more. So again, the study breaks that down a little bit more. But you can see there, 46% say 9 or more people handle the majority of immigration and global mobility in their organization. And again, based on the size, that changes quite a bit. And then I think another thing, and this is when we'll get into some of the what I find fascinating, because this was at the beginning of the year, right? So we did immigration trends, again, 400 employers. And when we pulled that out of, when it's in field, it was right after the inauguration of the current administration, the Trump administration. And so survey went, we got it back, obviously, and so this was all just right past the inauguration. I'm really interested to see what the study shows this year, because even then, 83% of employers believe the U.S. immigration system has an impact on their company's ability or hiring and retention strategies. And as we broke that down further, they said, top reason we've had to increase our budgets. We're engaging in advocacy efforts. We're hiring additional foreign nationals. We're actually delaying projects because of the immigration system. We had to increase staff. And another one, which is quite frankly a little bit scary, is that 21% of employers said, because of the U.S. immigration system, we had to move our work overseas. We had to move employees, open locations in Canada, Mexico, which we're hearing more and more about. And so that is what employers are here or feeling, and that's what they're doing about it. And the challenges with immigration, and I know all of you on the phone and listening in are obviously very acutely aware of these challenges, but there's sort of two factors in the challenges. There's one, just the legislative or the policy arena, and we'll talk about, cancellation of premium processing and more scrutiny on applications, more denials and RFEs. So there's that piece of it, and then there's just the challenges with the actual immigration process itself, and that's really what these two questions were meant to understand, is what are your biggest challenges in really managing the immigration function. So, 31% said gathering documents, fear of missing a deadline, foreign national anxiety, fielding foreign national questions. There's responsiveness of our attorney. On the global side, they said, you said differing regulations in each country. I'm not sure if it's a work permit, if it's a business visa, what do I need? And that's where you see business travel versus work permit, just maintaining accurate records, and you'll start to see that in a few other studies that we did. That's becoming more and more of a challenge. A good chunk said no challenges on the global side, so actually we should try to get in touch with them and see what they figured out. But it is, again, there's sort of two sides of this coin. One being the sort of the internal management of immigration within an organization, which is what those questions went to, and then this one, which is just the macro challenges that employers have. So we asked what would you like most change to the U.S. immigration system? Having quicker processing times, allowing more expedited filing. That's not too surprising, because once we find, our ideal person that we've been looking for, especially in the STEM areas, and now we have to either transfer an H-1B or even wait for the cap, we do want to know immediately if we can depend on this talent. And so as we look at that, that's not too surprising. We'll talk about some of the challenges that we've had this year with even slower processing times. But reforming the green card process to increase annual allotment and decrease waiting times, especially for citizens of China and India, for those extremely long waiting times. Lowering fees, not too surprisingly, because we want to try to cut costs everywhere we can. Improved insight, so transparency for employees is also a really important one. And then increasing the cap, not too surprisingly, and then lowering requests for evidence, which actually almost doubled, actually more than double. It actually increased just about by 45% this year, and we'll talk about what ALO report, or USCIS actually reported in the first half of the year. So that's a little bit about just sort of the employer perspective and what we learned from immigration trends with our study, but then also what we're hearing from our employers. And I'll continue to have that balance between what's happening and then what we are hearing from employers. So, but I'm going to dig into this just a bit. This is going to be super surface. We actually have webinars that have covered every single one of these in more detail, but I will just cover them at a broad stroke. So, two things that sort of happened this year, and there's actually an amazing New York Times article that was just yesterday, actually, just went out, just about this in particular. But there's sort of two ways that the government can make changes, right? There's the legislative part, which has to go through Congress, and then there's just the enforcement. So things that don't have to get congressional approval, but can, quite frankly, change the dynamic of immigration in the U.S. pretty dramatically, and I think that's what a lot of us have felt, and we'll validate with some of this information. So on the legislative side, there were the executive orders, there was the Hire American, Buy American, and the travel bans, and then there was also DACA, so we'll talk about those. And then on the enforcement side, this is really, there wasn't a ton done on the executive or congressional side. Actually, nothing. There was mainly just the executive orders, aside from the removal of DACA or cancellation. But on the enforcement side, that's really where we saw all of the changes. And although there weren't, major restrictions, more scrutiny and just more challenges did bring quite a bit of, stress, quite frankly, for foreign nationals, but also challenges on the employer or HR side. So, again, as Ian said, you'll get a copy of all of these. We put a ton of content into it because we know that, one, you share this internally, and two, you like to reference it. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but we will definitely share it. I think most of us on the line know that there have been several travel ban executive orders that have been tried to put through. I think the net out for everyone is that this last one, so the one that was released on September 24th, is actually being upheld by the Supreme Court. They did let the travel ban take full effect, and so you've got some detail there, but just know at a high level, if you have employees or employees who have spouses or otherwise from Iran, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Chad, North Korea, Iraq, or Venezuela, there are very specific rules around that. And so obviously I'm not going to give any sort of legal advice, but make sure you reach out to your dedicated attorney and just get a good game plan for that. But in general, the attorneys at GIA are Envoy affiliated, or the Envoy affiliated law firm, has pretty much at this point said, just don't travel. Don't travel outside of the U.S. if you are a citizen from any of these countries, and then to really talk to them and further for a game plan for future. So that's the one executive order, and then the other one was the Buy American, Hire American, which was interesting because for the most part, what came out of it was that basically the government wants all entities to investigate and put more efforts into unearthing fraud, especially within the H-1B visa program. And although, again, it's an executive order, so it needs congressional approval to make major changes on the H-1B, but we're going to put more scrutiny on H-1B, and then it called for like a full analysis and recommendation for the future of the H-1B, or the future of that skilled worker visa. That was actually supposed to be out in October. We have not seen that yet, and so right now it's really just still focused on that data gathering, and it has not really implemented any new policies. This is one that is very much a political in the political arena right now. It's the DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So this is children of undocumented immigrants here in the U.S. And under Obama, they implemented this to basically protect them and keep them here in the U.S. And so end of this year, in October actually, the administration canceled it. So they didn't renew it, canceled it. And so basically we're just waiting. The Democrats are pushing to get this pushed through by end of year. We are now, probably not going to happen. It's December 21st, but really by March is when something has to be decided. And so we're sort of in this wait and see, but decisions do have to be made because there's about 800,000 people here in the U.S. that would be impacted. So something that we're watching very closely, and it is an employment challenge too. The majority of DACA recipients are employed by U.S. companies. So we know that this is a big impact too, and we of course will keep you updated as new developments occur. So those are really more on the legislative side. So some things that can be just instituted via USCIS or the Department of Labor, in this instance USCIS, can be done with really, sort of like under the radar. And there has been a lot of this that has happened that has created, challenges for, honestly, for people just to keep up with it. So in-person interviews have typically not been required. And now, so as of October 1st, USCIS said they are going to start phasing in interviews for green cards. So that anyone that is applying for status or the I-485, application to register permanent residence, so again, green cards. There's also a piece of this to refugee and asylee, but for all of us on the line here from an employment base, this is a big change. So employment-based green cards also have to go through the interview process. Now we had one of the attorneys, Scott Cohagen from GIA, talking about this just a few weeks ago, and what his sort of synopsis was, everyone's kind of figuring this out right now, including the officers, because they've never done interviews for employment-based, right? It's always been family-based, and so even they're questioning, they're still sort of figuring it out, but it is something to be definitely aware of. Work with your attorney, make sure your foreign nationals are working with your attorney to prepare for those interviews, and just be aware of that big change. Another seemingly under the radar, but I mean, could have a huge impact is the way that the USDA approves extensions or renewals of visas. So in particular, the H-1B, has the one extension, and so in the past, that first approval sort of, it was referenced by the adjudicating officer, and that was kind of upheld. That was the direction. Now that first approval really doesn't hold any water, and they go through the same process. Again, the recommendation from GIA is, well, this doesn't really change much, especially on the GIA side, or again, Envoy's affiliated law firm, because you should be treating extensions the same as you're treating, sort of first applications. And so if you're not doing that, definitely do that, because they are looking at these with fresh pair of eyes and really up to the officer's discretion on that approval. So another one, and this goes directly to the first two changes that employers wanted the U.S. immigration process to make was make it faster, right, and expedite filing. And so we went right backwards from that this year. So premium processing, again, we'll share the slides. I'm not going to go through all of these dates, but basically premium processing was ceased for a 6-month period. It was brought back for medical doctors and under and certain Conrad or waiver programs, and then it was brought back for a few more CAP exempts, and then brought back for pending petition, and then finally it was brought back for everything. So and this, of course, happened like right in the midst of there it is, April 3rd CAP season, and so we hate to make any sort of projections here, but this could be something else that happens. I mean, the reasoning that the government gave was that they had such a backlog that the more that they were premium processing, the more it's just pushing the rest back. So they wanted to get it through as many as possible. Depending on the applications that happen, for those 85,000 spots in the CAP, we could see, something like this happen again. But, again, it doesn't. I think the general advice that everyone is getting is starting, if you are participating in the CAP, starting that early, getting it done, because either way, that's not going to impact. I mean, premium processing won't have an impact on your end of the application. Okay, so this was probably, I guess, one of the more surprising. So actually, Ayla just commented on this recently. This was part of that New York Times article. So the USCIS just reported in the last 30 days or so, they issued 85,000 requests for evidence on H-1Bs between January and August. That's a 45% increase over the same period last year. Okay, so I find that number staggering. 85,000 RFEs. Well, there are 85,000 spots, right, for the CAP, and I know that's transfers and others, so it's beyond just the 85,000. But it is a large number. We definitely felt it. Our customers, Ayla definitely has been commenting on it, and so again, sort of flying under the radar because this isn't a legislative or congressional thing, but they can create more scrutiny, and these RFEs, as many of us know, can be equal, if not more work than the original application in some cases. So just tons and tons of work on both the HR side, the employer side, and immigration attorneys that really created a challenge for organizations. So as we look at, what has changed, budgets increasing, things like that, this will definitely have a huge impact in 2017. And so the other one that we are starting to hear more and more about, and we're starting to hear from employers that they're experiencing this, because at first it was sort of a threat, and now we're starting to see that coming to fruition. So more investigations, site audits, right? USCIS fraud detection and national security directorate. So FDNS officers are making more unannounced visits. They're coming on site, right, to verify petitioners and beneficiaries. Typically what at least what's sort of the word on the street is that high volume petitioners are likely to see more audits or on-sites. but fraud checks are up significantly. So, and this is even at the visa issuance stage. We're starting to see more and more 221Gs issued with more frequency. So, getting all the way up to the visa issuance stage and seeing that has been an uptick that we're hearing more and more from employers. And then, and this is why. So the first 100 days, President's inauguration, immigration arrests climbed nearly 40% over the previous year. A lot of this is illegal or undocumented, but beyond that, the budget this administration sent to Congress for approval included a $4.6 billion request focused on enforcement. It's not just on the illegal side; it is most definitely all-encompassing of immigration. And so, $300 million to hire new officers, $7.2 to hire new prosecutors. And so, again, under this administration, they're just wanting to make sure that of the programs that we have in place for immigration, that there isn't fraud, there isn't abuse, and they're doing everything they can to root that out, in essence, to ensure that we have a strong immigration program. And so that really leads us to immigration compliance. And so as we look at, so this study we actually did, this is not immigration trends, this is the changing landscape of immigration management, which is also the title of this webinar. But we did this with Bloomberg, BLR, HR Daily Advisor, about midway through the year. So actually a little bit further, so September, and then this study was released in October. And a lot of this was around what we're talking about today, but a lot also around site audits and compliance. So, not too surprising, 1 in 4 employers are reporting very concerned about immigration compliance. Only 13% really said they weren't concerned. And those are probably organizations that don't do a ton of immigration, I would imagine. Almost half of employers say they have become more concerned about immigration compliance in the last year. And it's not too surprising, again, that accurate records comes back up because almost half of employers say that maintaining accurate records and ensuring what we submitted to the government, for instance, on our H-1B or LCA, is up to date. It's indicative of the current situation of the employee, and it is a pressing concern for organizations. I know we talked about this on one of the other webinars, but luckily, the government has said that they will accept digital files, especially for public access files, which is helpful because maintaining accurate records, if that's already a challenge and you're doing that in literally physical files in file cabinets or closets, we've seen a lot of those, that is a concern if there is a site audit, which again is that site visit or site audit and those next two. If that does happen, it's really challenging to obviously show those documentation or those documents when you've got to go searching for them. So it's helpful that they are now digital. And so one big trend that we have seen this year is more and more organizations moving to digital public access files and working with us to do so. So back to the sort of the site audit, 32% of employers say they're fully prepared for a site audit. Only 32%, 46% say they are somewhat prepared. 14% of the employers from this study said they had a site visit in the last 12 months. Several companies that we talked to, both customers and non-customers, have reported for the first time ever site audits. Or site visits from DOL or USCIS. And so obviously, a big takeaway from this is just to be prepared, making sure that all of your employees know what to do in the case of one. Typically we're hearing that an email is sent ahead of time, letting HR know so that they have a little bit of ramp or of time to prepare. But sometimes it's just that they show up and so does your receptionist know, to contact you as an organization? Do your sponsored employees know what to do, and have all of that sort of buttoned up in a game plan and a checklist, which we have plenty of those resources if you go to our blog on a site visit checklist. And obviously, as always, talk to your immigration attorney to prepare. And then as we look at the global landscape and I was talking to Sarah Maxwell, who heads up our global immigration services here. She said there weren't any. I mean, there's obviously big changes like Brexit, and just recently, over the last week or so, they came to some terms with Brexit for EU nationals, which will be helpful. There was Australia, so the subclass 457 skilled labor visa that was terminated earlier this year. China had a whole other sort of immigration overhaul, and then of recent, and I'm sure many of you are hearing that in the news now, Canada has actually been putting a more positive side of it, trying to make a more aggressive immigration program to get key talent into the over the Canadian border. So, but on the global immigration, it's not too surprising. Similarly, there's compliance challenges. Record keeping is a big one. Audit site visits, penalties, fines, imprisonment. Again, also challenges. Employees being stuck at the border was a big concern for organizations. Obviously, legal consequences. Another big one that came up more and more is employees traveling without notifying HR, global mobility. And this is employees across the board, so it's not just sponsored employees, which is super critical that all foreign nationals or sponsored employees are notifying you if they are traveling, especially overseas. But really, any employee that's going to a conference, overseas in the UK, and maybe going on a few sales calls at that same time, does that require a work permit? Does that require a business visa, or can they just travel on their passport? So those are some of the sort of trends or things that Sarah was seeing. Otherwise, the one thing to keep in mind, I think probably because it's top of mind for her, but right now, especially with the holiday season, many government entities across the world are completely shut down. So keep that in mind if you've got employees that are needing to get over into projects first of the year. And so as we look past and out into 2018, here's some of the things that we are most definitely going to be watching. Obviously, DACA, again, the Democrats are trying to pass legislation before the end of this year, which is probably not going to happen, or at least at the very beginning of next year, over the next couple months. The Buy American, Hire American, we are still waiting for that sort of analysis and recommendation, but that's something to keep in mind. Talking to employers across the nation, as well as various immigration attorneys around the area and nation too, I think the scrutiny RFP thing, we should just continue to monitor it, but I don't know that that's going to be going away. I mean, I think that might be a relatively new normal, and so really just ensuring that that you're prepared for that you've got the bandwidth, that you've got the partner, most importantly, that can help you through that. Because the scrutiny on applications for computer programmers, these requests for evidence, even denials, are definitely something that have not been seen in quite a bit of time. And then the other one that we're seeing is so there was an entrepreneur rule that was pushed off, and so that has been eliminated. That was under Obama to basically let entrepreneurs stay in the U.S. for up to 5 years. The administration also said it was going to eliminate the H-4 program, which is the program that granted work permits or work authorization for spouses of H-1B workers, which would be a challenge, and then also announcing some plans to restrict the ability of foreign students to work temporarily. So I would imagine that's something around the OPT or CPTs that many students are on before they go into the H-1B. So that's sort of what we have seen. Again, I am anticipating and excited to see what the data tells us from Immigration Trends 2018. We will ask similar questions that we did in 2016 and 2017. So we see some trending around green card policies, around immigration policies, around benefits, around perks. And then we also will dive into a little bit more on the compliance side, a little bit more on the technology side, and how organizations are using technology to help sort of manage this process. But excited about that. But please, if you would like a early access to the report, let us know. Send an email to insights@envoyglobal.com, and we will be sure to get that out. But for the most part, our goal is to release on February 1st, 2018. So that is all we have. I'm just looking at the time. Good, 1:40. So I wasn't completely going on tangents like I sometimes do on these hot topics. But that is all we have for now. Ian, did you see any questions? If you do have questions, please put those into the Q&A section to the right-hand side.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. That was quite an insightful presentation that you just gave. We do have a couple questions that rolled in. Some of these are kind of speculative. What do we think about them? But now that 2017 H-1B RFEs have been submitted, is there any evidence that they're successful, that they're coming back with any issues, or how is that trending for employers?
Yeah, so it's sort of all over the board now. Most of them are successful. I mean, and again, I can't really speak to the broader market, only from what employers tell us. And so the majority, but for the first time in many people's careers, they saw second and even third RFEs on the same application. And we heard that from AILA, and I keep saying AILA, I should probably verify, American Immigration Lawyers Association. And so, they reported that as well. So again, it's hard to say, but it's definitely been a little bit all over the board.
And then in regard to H4s, this one is just going to be more of a what do we speculate, but if they're eliminated, do we think that that'll affect everyone, that it'll affect only people moving forward? How might it affect families? I know there's a lot of news lately about how that's going to cut household incomes in half. Right. So I think regardless of what happens with H4s, it'll be detrimental to these families who do rely on that visa.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and yeah, it's really hard for me, to speculate as an individual, let alone not an attorney. But anything on the policy stuff, it's really up to the government to decide, right? Whether they will honor the current H4s or not. And so it's unfortunately a little bit of a wait and see type of situation.
And we have just a couple other questions coming through regarding the H-1B cap that will begin in April this year. So we're starting to see clients preparing for that. We'll be releasing an H-1B visa cap survival guide shortly, so keep an eye out for that as well.
Great. Yeah, we're also seeing a few questions on, sort of success rates, and it's really hard for us to speak to, success rates on the extension. So I talked a little bit about the fact that that was a change, right, in policy, that before the approval on the first application sort of superseded, or they were to refer to that for the approval on the second. Now it's treated as a brand new one. It's super new. That was just in October, so really not seeing a ton of or enough data on that to talk about success rates.
And that seems to be all of the questions that we have, so I think we can wrap it up. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us at events@envoyglobal.com. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining. And as a reminder, we will be sending this presentation within 24 hours after we end. So thanks again.
Thank you.